When I tell people I run a climbing gym, they're like, what does that look like? And I explain, like, come in and you can climb the wall. There's these plastic holds. We also have the option of sport climbing. You'll get a harness, you'll get the shoes. It's easier too to just like whip out a phone and show a photo. You're like, here's what we're working with. I was drawn to climbing because it didn't have that competitive mentality forced like onto you by like other people. So when you're doing this sport, it's more about yourself and pushing yourself. It was easy to see how to progress like all on my own. It tested my mental strength of telling yourself like, I can't do this, and then you do it and you're like, wait a sec, I'm capable of more than I thought. Gyms back in the day were a little out of necessity. So there was like the bare minimum. Climbers like to use the term dirt bagging, basically like putting in just enough money into something to like get by. And the gyms just didn't have an atmosphere that you like were like, I want to spend hours in here. You're like, I'm gonna go in, get my workout and get out. When we first started out, we wanted it to be a space where it could promote the rest of our community in any way we could. It was more of like trying to bring that community aspect I felt outside, going to the crag and seeing people inside, and how to keep that going.
DVB Crux, Tim Derrington interview, take one.
It all started from just an Austin dinner party. I was living in a tiny mid-century apartment complex on 7th Street, just west of Whole Foods downtown. And everybody that lived in that complex was kind of a character. One of them was a guy named Mark Meyer. Weekly, he would have these big dinner parties, and then he'd invite over just whoever. And we'd all get together and drink too much, talk architecture. Time passed, and then an email out of the blue. He's like, hey Tim, meet my friends. They're starting a climbing gym and they need an architect.
Tim was a climber.
No. I climb, but I would never call myself a climber because anybody that is a climber could see right through that. I wouldn't do that to them.
I think it was just like first asking for advice on everything, and then it was like, okay, like let's have you design it. The building when we first started was just like a auto body shop. So it was a plain like metal warehouse.
It was just sort of Wild West like landlord. The Crux had their contractor and the landlord was his own contractor, and he required to keep some of the scope and so on. It's amazing that it even got built.
We wanted to offer fitness and yoga classes because that was something not typical in climbing gyms. We wanted to also have like a retail section to like prepare you to go outside. So we didn't just have gear that's only indoor gear. We had like quick draws, harnesses, ropes, so that you could take that outside. Tim was great because he envisioned this space, what he likes to call the jewel. And so it was like floor to ceiling windows that popped out and like really caught your eye. And it added like square footage because we added in a mezzanine, which helps double your floor space. And so you can provide even more. And we're like, okay, now we can provide a lounge space and a yoga studio and fitness space.
It was sort of a new gen climbing gym. I didn't think anything of sort of future iterations. I just thought it was really cool. Give it all you've got, make it as cool as you can. That was their first one. So it became really successful, and they called me up a few years later and said, hey, we're gonna do another one. Here on site at Crux 2, let's take a look around. So then we did the next one. And they've called me up a few times since.
We were looking for something in North Austin with tall walls. Hard to find a building that's 60 feet tall with no floors. That doesn't exist, so it's easier to just kind of build it yourself. So we found a piece of property in Pflugerville and we went to work.
The Pflugerville location is completely different from the two Cruxes that sort of predate that one. It was ground up. So everything was fresh and new. If you're going to build a building fresh and new for a rock climbing gym, then what's it going to be?
We can build it exactly how we want, but it also adds the pressure of like, everything needs to be very intentional because people are going to be like, why did they do that? And so you can't like get it wrong because you can't be like, oh, well, we couldn't do this because X, Y, and Z. I just like wanted it to be intentional and efficient. The climbing gyms always lead the design, and then we kind of like have architects like almost follow it in a sense.
Is when you do a place like Crux, you can go and use it and study not only your patterns of use, but other people's patterns of use. And you can actually refine your architecture by observation.
This like balance of like industrial space, and then you're adding in these like beautiful architectural design climbing walls that are so captivating just to look at.
If you're not limited to the box you were provided that you're renovating, what do you turn this into? It's an opportunity for a new typology.
What they're gonna notice first is the climbing walls. So we really had to make sure we like nailed that, and when people walked in, they were like, whoa. And that's the goal, it's like they immediately see it and they're like, I wanna climb that. To just take all the extra amenities of our facility and kind of like try and put them together as close as we can. And that way we can give a gigantic space to the climbing wall company to just like design your heart out, this is your space. So we did that in two aspects of like the bouldering here, but we also wanted a really cool feature for the rope climbing right when you walked in. We created this like arch thing, does this wave feature as you go further in, and it gets pretty aggressive. You know, it's a showy piece, and as we were building it, I kept getting more and more nervous that I'm like, oh my gosh, there's gonna be like 3 people in Austin that can actually climb this, it's so steep. And I was like getting more concerned that we went overboard, but then actually getting on it myself and like watching other people, I'm like, oh, this is like very doable. And it just makes you feel like a badass. Like, you're like, look at me, like I like did this whole route that's overhung. And it's not as intimidating as I guess it looks like once you get on it. So that's been like my favorite, like rewarding part.
So if you become a rock climber, even though I'm not, I still like to do it, and you just go a few times a week, then you start to understand whether some of your assumptions on architecture and use of a building were right. So what does a climbing gym look like? And how can we build it in such a way that we minimize materials, minimize energy inefficiency, and maximize the sort of appearance? The end result was a big bloated form. We took the form, essentially shrink wrap all the program that we had inside, and then started carving away just a few spots to give it a sculptural form that would be reminiscent of the walls inside. The idea behind the form is make it such that from the outside it is striking enough that it recalls something that's new. We chose this sort of insulated metal panel material because it's an all-in-one product.
Like most buildings you visit, like if you go to a brewery, it's just like a metal building, but Here we used insulated metal wall panels, so it just kind of was like a grooved plug and play, and that led to us like moving on past that way quicker. We didn't have to drywall it. It actually has like a pretty clean finish to it. Like we chose a white interior color, so that helped that we didn't have to go back through and like paint these giant swaths of wall.
It's highly, highly energy efficient. I think it got its start doing like walk-in coolers. It's that efficient. And we chose the silver color because it's very indicative of rural Texas structures. The galvalume barn, water cisterns, silos, things like that. As well as very energy efficient because the color itself reflects infrared heat.
We like having a lot of natural light, so that way you're not feeling like you're in this like dungy, closed off warehouse space.
Natural light is critical to the experience of a space. In all of our Crux buildings, we've tried to introduce some component of natural light. The very first one were just holes in the ceiling, essentially little round holes. The next one was this long monitor that went from basically the very front to the back of the building that allows for the light to come in. And then of course, at this Crux and Pflugerville, we have clear story windows up high on the south facing side, and then we also have other large windows in the space. All throughout the course of the day, the sun rises over there, swings around in the sky, and sets this way. And that allows for the light to kind of come in at different angles and change color throughout the day.
They let in a lot and they filter in a lot of light, but they are not harsh light like hitting you all the time, and they're not bleaching our walls or our climbing holds and changing the colors of them. Derrington's team has kind of got that in mind when they're like programming, like, okay, this is going to be a real window versus this is going to be that filtered polygal window that to like still let in light but not the heat load.
We introduced a rather large skylight directly above the desk below, and then punched this big opening in the mezzanine. So the diversity of experience is really important for just niceness, you know? It's totally unnecessary. You don't need things to be nice and have the diversity of experience. But if you can introduce that, why wouldn't you? But if you've been in a space without windows versus one with a nicely placed window with some sun cascading inside, you know the difference. And that's what we tried to introduce. The ceiling is this height because this wall demanded that the ceiling be exactly that high. So you can see just past the wall.
Obviously we were like, we're going tall. Speed climbing is now an Olympic sport, so people are looking for facilities to be able to train that on, and it's very hard to find one that will allow you to go full 55 feet up in the air.
The pop-up had to be taller than 55 feet because those competition walls are 55 feet in height. Those are Olympic height, very, very important. The zoning is 60-foot building height, max. So we had 5 feet between the top of the walls and the top of the building, which seems like a lot, but at this scale, it's actually not. Well, when you're spanning the distances we have in there, and all the insulation plus the parapet itself, you run out of room. So you can notice over there the beams are actually open web trusses. Here they're not, they're I-beams, wide flanges. And then to compress it further, instead of using the sort of conventional corrugated composite metal decking, we had to go with the specialty decking that was tighter. And then on top of that, we built our insulated roof that slopes. We were just by inches compliant with the city zoning.
Like first I always am like, I go through my spiel of like anybody can climb and how it doesn't discriminate, but I also emphasize that we have like much more than climbing.
The Pflugerville Crux isn't so much adding new program, rather expanding upon the program that's already working.
If you go up a route and you're like, this is not my thing, Grace, then you can like hop over to a yoga class or like go to, there's a whole fitness space. I'm like, just go chill in a sauna. Like who wouldn't want that? A lot of times you'll see that like people's significant others or their kids or parents are like, climbing's not for me, but I want to hang out with you. So they come to the space, they might split off for a bit, but then like rejoin back up and play ping pong or go get a coffee together afterwards.
At the first location, they're adjacent to a coffee shop. And that component of libation, I think is one of the successful qualities that Crux has been able to capitalize on. They always pair up with some sort of libations component. So that could be a beer place, a coffee shop, whatever. There's a coffee shop sitting right over there. When this was brought to us, that coffee shop was a part of the big square of building. And it was really unfortunate because without an outdoor space, there's a lack of diversity of gathering and just a lack of transition, really. So what we did is we proposed pushing the building a little bit further back, reclaiming some space that was behind the building that was afforded to fire lane. So we reclaimed a lot of impervious cover and space that we gave back to the front of the building and actually pulled the program apart. So you have Crux and all of its program, the coffee shop over there, and then with the residual sort of interstitial space that remained, we created this courtyard for food trucks and just general gathering. Well, that's a place that people love going and spending a lot of time. And time is the way to build culture. If you just kind of go, do your exercise and leave, there's not going to be a culture.
I will tell you, I was like super stressed going to the suburbs of Austin and being like, is this gonna be if we build it, they will come? This project was like twice as long from a remodel. You're doing the ground up, it just feels like it'll never get here. And you're like telling your team like it's happening, it will happen, telling your community like it will open, I promise. And our team pushed so hard to get open as soon as possible for the community. So finally getting to open the doors, it's been really rewarding and like okay, this is worth it. This was like the right thing. It's been amazing to see people return to climbing. That's been a lot of feedback is that everybody's like excited to have this here and have a place for their families to go to or for themselves to go to and get back into working out. So.
I can't speak for Crux ownership, but if I could, I hope they do a new building every year for the rest of my career. They're awesome to work with, so if they want to continue doing buildings, I hope they do.